Welcome to Passion for Sound, the channel dedicated to thorough and honest reviews of headphones, earphones, DACs, headphone amps, other components and accessories. Basically everything audio related except power amps and passive speakers. My name's Lachlan and my goal is to explore and discuss all kinds of audio topics, even the controversial ones, to help us all find more enjoyment from music. Thanks for watching and enjoy the video. Hey folks, welcome to another Passion for Sound audio review, and today we're taking a look at the Sennheiser IE100 Pro. I deliberately scheduled this one to come up in this period of time because it's getting close to Black Friday, and I thought this might be a great option for some of you looking for a new pair of IEMs and hoping to find a bargain. Now I don't know if there's going to be any specific Black Friday deals on these, but it was an earphone that I thought might be on the list of those of you bargain hunting. The IE100 is a relatively new product from Sennheiser. At $100 or 179 Australian dollars, it's a budget IEM, but coming from a very well-known and well-respected brand. The big question, of course, was whether or not some of the magic from the amazing IE900 had trickled down into the IE100 and whether that made it worth buying. To get things started, it's important for me to explain that the IE100, as I understand it, comes in two different versions. You can get the plain old IE100 with the regular cable, or you can get what I have here, which is the IE100 with the normal cable, but also the Bluetooth module. So as you'll see here, there is no 3.5mm plug here. This is just a wireless or semi-wireless setup of Bluetooth. So that's the version I've got here. It's what I'll be reviewing today, and that is the IE100 Pro with Bluetooth module. The first thing I thought of when I unpacked the IE100s was they remind me so much of the Shure SE215 in the look, the feel, the form factor, everything about them. And that's great. The Shure SE215s were a long time staple for many people entering kind of the audiophile IEM market. And whilst they're not the best IEM on the planet, they were a really good solid option. So being reminded of those by the IE100 was a nice first step, but of course there's a lot more to it than whether it's like another good IEM. One thing in particular that reminded me of the 215s was the fact that these have a really snug, comfortable in-ear fit, but they're also a very shallow profile. So they're going to sit really comfortably in your ears for a long period of time. On top of that, you can also get these in colours, so I've got these in the black, but as I understand it, they come in clear and red as well, I believe. So the 215s, which we will look at soon, they used to come in, maybe they still do, in a range of colours, and now so do the Sennheiser IE100s. So we'll get to a comparison with the Shure SE215 soon, but before we do, let me tell you a bit more about the design of the IE100s here. These use a single 10mm dynamic driver, and according to Sennheiser's marketing, it's been part of the development of their new dynamic driver range to produce better quality dynamics that can do the full frequency range justice. Now, whether it's really that much different from anything else on the market, I don't know, and I'm not going to dig into, because what really matters is how they fit, how they function, and how they sound. The drivers themselves have a sensitivity and impedance of 20 ohms and 115 decibels per volt sensitivity. And I specify volt there because most of the time we see sensitivity quoted in decibels per milliwatt. In quoting it per volt, it's a little bit different, and what it does mean is that these are moderately more difficult to drive than the average IEM, but they're still very, very easy. So don't listen to anyone telling you that you need a huge amplifier or anything to drive these. They only require 16 milliwatts to get to 110 decibels. So they're easy to drive. They're just not quite as easy as some of the other IEMs on the market. A couple of other things to point out about in terms of the design and the features of these or the accessories of these. The design of them is very much with professional musicians or amateur musicians in mind, but people that want to use these for potentially mixing, mastering, maybe monitoring during live performances, that's what these are really intended to be for. It doesn't mean they're not a great consumer IEM as well, as we'll talk about soon, but Sennheiser have gone to great lengths to design these with long-term professional users in mind. And I say professional meaning that it's not necessarily for your high-end superstar performers, but for those of you that are looking for something that you can wear for long periods of time when you're actually doing something with a specific function, a specific output, like I said, mixing, mastering, monitoring, etc. And with that in mind, they've designed a very comfortable shell, as I've already talked about. It's lightweight, it is plasticky, but it's a relatively decent quality plastic. It's not the most premium I've felt, but it's certainly fine. They've also produced a new cable for the IEMs, and it's a really nice, good quality feeling rubberized cable. It's nothing special, but it's got good strain relief at the plug, and it's got a really nice memory wire setup up here at the top where it connects to the earphone. One thing that is worth noting is that these use a special connector. So it might look at first glance like an MMCX connector, but it's not. The pin actually protrudes much further from the housing on the cable, and that means it is a proprietary connector. I haven't seen any reference anywhere as to what it's actually called, so my assumption is that it is a dedicated Sennheiser in-house development. So that means no aftermarket cables for these, but the good news is the cable that comes with it is very, very good. It's worth noting, given that these are designed for professionals, that you can also buy other cables from Sennheiser. Most notably, you can buy a mono cable. So if you are monitoring and you like to have one ear open and one ear sealed, you can actually buy a mono cable for these that will just connect to one earpiece, whichever one you want. So that's a nice bonus for those of you that are using it for that sort of purpose. As you'll have just seen, what you also get is this little kind of sprung pouch so you can carry around your IEMs in here. Not particularly protective, but very, very compact. The Bluetooth module that I've already mentioned, and I'll come back around to that shortly. And then also you get just some very basic tips and a nozzle cleaner. So nothing fancy, nothing special, but everything you'd expect for $100 and all of a good level of quality. The tips are good quality, the cable's good quality, there's a little pouch is fine, everything's just right for $100 or even a little bit better. So let's come back around now and talk a bit about the Bluetooth module. I'm not going to go into huge depth here. I'll come back around after I talk about general sound quality and tell you how the sound of the Bluetooth module is compared to a wired connection with these. But the things you need to know is that on this little Bluetooth adapter module that comes with it, you've got a set of buttons on this side here, which is on the right ear side, and it's got things like an up and down volume, a power button. It's also got a speech button there for the Google Assistant or Siri, and so it's going to give you all of the functionality that you'd expect from any other Bluetooth headphone or earphone. There is a microphone, of course, built in, so you can take calls when using the Bluetooth module. There is no microphone built into the plain cord, so it is a case where if you wanted to use these for phone calls, video conferences and the like, you would need to use them Bluetooth. Beyond that, the other features worth knowing is that the Bluetooth module is quoted as having 10 hours of playback time, and that's using the SBC codec. It'll take a full charge in about 1.5 hours, so you're going to get fairly good usage out of it in terms of battery life and recharging time. And then the final thing worth knowing is in terms of the codecs available. So as I've already mentioned, it's got SBC codec, AAC, and it will also support aptX and low latency aptX, but there's no high res codec there, so nothing like aptX HD or LDAC. So at this point we've got a budget IEM that's well made, it comes with a good set of features, it's got Bluetooth or wired connectivity, and it's incredibly comfortable. Once again, much like the IE900s and things like AudioFlyers that use a very similar setup to these IEMs in terms of the design of the actual earpiece itself, these are incredibly comfortable for very, very long listening sessions. So that's a great step. We've got good accessories, good features, and very, very good comfort. So of course the question now is, how does it sound? The IE100s have a tonality that I'd describe as mostly neutral, but with a tilt towards upper mid and treble emphasis, and particularly emphasis in the very upper registers of treble around about the 10 to 12 kilohertz mark. They've got a little bit of mid-bass emphasis to offset that treble, and it means they kind of almost get you grooving. They're not an earphone that I'd describe as fun, but certainly on tracks that I use to test whether an earphone will kind of get my foot tapping and my head bobbing, they almost get me there. So they're not a fun or pure enjoyment earphone, but they're certainly also not cold and soulless. So it's a really good balance that Sennheiser have struck here. Working through the frequency range, we've got treble that's crisp, extended and detailed. Generally sibilance is controlled very, very well, but occasionally, depending on the track, the upper treble frequency emphasis, that sort of 10 to 12 kilohertz range, can get a bit too much on some tracks. It's not out of control or dreadful because it is balanced by that mid-bass hump that I mentioned before, but at the same time, it can occasionally get just a little bit too much. It's not a reason that I would ever want to pull them out of my ears and stop listening, but it does make me want to turn a few tracks here and there down by just 1 or 2 notches. On the other hand, mid-range, vocals, that sort of area, everything is really, really good. So vocals, whether they're male or female vocals, have a good sense of body and weight and presence, but also the right amount of texture and air. By having that extra treble emphasis that I mentioned before, things can get just a tiny, tiny bit dry in the mids and the vocals sometimes, but it's never too much. Once again, it's never distracting, displeasing, it never makes me want to stop listening to them, but if I am comparing them to what I consider some of the best IEMs I've heard, you can hear that the tuning is not quite perfect. And at $100 I don't expect it to be. For $100 I think these are really, really well tuned. And you might be sitting there thinking, hang on, it doesn't matter what the price is, the tuning should still be good. And I do agree with that. My point being that at this price point, there are going to be some compromises made. And sometimes it comes down to things like the materials that the driver is made of, or that the housing is made of. It might be to do with the level of intricacy that goes into the moulding and the shaping of the drivers and the housings. All those sorts of things are going to come down to a cost versus value question. And so when I'm saying that these are not quite perfectly tuned, what I mean is that you can hear there's very minor compromises being made, but they are very minor. What we've got here is an excellent IEM at $100. It just means it doesn't perform at the level of, say, the IE900, which is $1,000, and nor should it. They're very different price categories. Coming back to the sound quality descriptions though, the bass from these is really, really good for a neutral tuned IEM. There's just enough mid-bass hump to give it some punch and some presence, but it never goes too far into making things thick or overly warm. I would be very comfortable mixing something or editing my audio, my voiceovers for instance. I would be very comfortable mixing them with these because I think with a little bit of getting used to them, you could consistently get good neutral editing and mixing from these. The bass extension from the IE100s is generally pretty good. It doesn't actually extend as deep as it sounds like it does, and that's partly because of that mid-bass hump. But again, at the price point, they're doing a very, very good job. Even on electronic bass tracks where the bass does go all the way down to 20 Hz, I didn't feel like they were running out of puff. Technically, if I compare them to something that does have full extension, I can hear that they're not quite going all the way down without a bit of roll-off, so the bass is there, it's just at a lower level. But at the same time, it's at least as good as I expect at the price, if not better. Overall, the bass from the IE100s is punchy and fast, but it's also got the right amount of presence and body. So it's not too fast where it comes across lean and like too snappy, but at the same time, it doesn't overemphasize anything and colour the rest of the sound signature. It's just really tastefully done. A couple of final points on sound quality is that detail retrieval, again at the price point, is very, very good. I never felt like I was missing anything when I listened to all my normal test tracks. It felt to me like the IE100 was keeping up with the very, very best IEMs I had. In comparison, it technically wasn't, but again my point here is that when you listen to these you don't feel like you're missing out on anything. There are gains to be had with higher level IEMs, but you don't need to get higher IEMs to enjoy the sense that you're hearing everything in the mix in a well-balanced tonality. Finally, the soundstage size, image placement and separation are all also very strong. The IE100s produce a really nice wide soundstage that's right up there with as good as any IEM I've heard, and the separation of sound to produce a clear image is also very good. Not top tier, but very, very good. Probably the one weak spot I'd call out for these in terms of soundstage is that they don't produce a great deal of depth. There's enough space between sounds that it doesn't come across sounding completely flat, but I didn't feel like I could hear the layers of instruments within a band, for example. There were just individually well-placed sounds within a relatively flat plane. And so overall, at the price and for my expectations at the price, the IE100 are at least as good, if not better than what I expect. These are an outstanding IEM with an excellent version of a fairly neutral, slightly treble/detail oriented tuning that are also incredibly comfortable to wear. And having previously said they reminded me of the SE215s, which retail at about $99 themselves, I thought that was the most obvious comparison to make here. And honestly, when I connected them up and listened to the same track across both of them, it's really a no contest. The IE100s absolutely destroy the 215 in every single way I can think of, except maybe bass weight. If you want a slightly thumpier, punchier IEM, the 215s are still better. But other than that, I just see no point in going for them. The 215s have a metallic tonality to the mids. There's also a weird tonal balance that puts too much emphasis in the treble and can get sibilant at times. And they also do this weird thing with the staging. Because of the way they're tuned, it's like some sounds are really present and focused and others are kind of recessed or veiled. It makes it a bit all over the shop. Now these are all things that you can get used to after listening to the 215s for a while. Your brain does kind of adapt to them, but they're definitely not performing in the level of something like the IE100. And to be fair, we're talking about a brand new 2021 designed IEM compared to the 215s, which have been around for eons now. So as I said, it's not entirely a fair contest, but if you're in the market for a well-designed IEM from a well-known, reputable brand with a tuning that's quite neutral and suitable for mixing, monitoring, mastering, that sort of thing, then the IE100 is the clear, easy winner. And for listening enjoyment, I'd say the same. I honestly can't see any reason anymore to reach for something like the 215 when the IE100 exists. The fact that you can flip it from a wired to a wireless version if you want to is also a huge bonus. And so with that in mind, I want to talk briefly about the performance of the wireless module compared to the wired performance of the IE100. And generally speaking, the sound from the Bluetooth module is almost identical to the sound from the wired connection. That of course is going to depend on what your wired source is, because here we've got a Bluetooth DAC and an earphone amplifier all built into this module, so it's going to be different to what you're hearing if you're using a dongle DAC, a desktop setup, professional live monitoring gear. Depending on what you're used to using the IE100s with as a wired IEM, it is going to influence how you compare the wireless performance to the wired. But when I say they perform basically the same, what I mean is the tonality doesn't really change between the wired and the wireless. There are some Bluetooth devices I've tried where the wired versus wireless are vastly different because of DSP applied within the Bluetooth module. In the IE100, none of that seems to be happening. So whilst the quality did drop slightly from a high-end source like the Hugo TT2, and that's a ridiculous comparison because we're talking $10,000 versus $100 for the IEMs and the wireless. So it's a crazy comparison, but my point being, tonality doesn't shift. The quality will vary slightly depending on what your source is. And so with the wireless module on the IE100s, the differences that I noticed was that the quality of the treble and indeed the quality of the overall sound did drop just a little bit. So there was a hint of harshness that came in, which is a sign of the amplifier circuit in here not being on the level of a top-end unit, and that's normal and to be expected. The other thing that happened was the soundstage did get a little bit smaller and separation of sounds was not quite as strong. But that's all really normal stuff when switching from one source to the next. So it's not a reason to be concerned about using these wireless. The fact that they maintain their tonality is the most important thing. Yes, there's a tiny bit of treble harshness introduced by the Bluetooth module, but nothing too severe. You are of course also trading off the fact that the various Bluetooth codecs here are all lossless, as at this point in time every Bluetooth codec is. But the fact that you don't have any kind of HD, whether it's aptX HD or LDAC codecs here, means that you are going to be losing sound quality compared to a wired connection, partly in the Bluetooth transmission. So there's a few factors going on that means you're not going to get absolute optimal performance from the wireless module, but it's still plenty good enough for use on the go. And so with all that said, I'm going to wrap things up here. I know I haven't done as many comparisons on this one as I do on other IEM reviews, but because of the wireless module, I see these as being a little bit different of a product offering. And therefore, I'm very comfortable saying on their own in isolation and having listened to them alongside other IEMs that I haven't mentioned here, I think these perform really really well at their price point. I did mention these in my previous review of the Blonde A8 Prometheus, and whilst the Prometheus does have some benefits overall as an IEM, it doesn't offer you things like the wireless usage, and it's not as neutral a tuning. So do check out the Prometheus review if you're interested in another comparison. But for now I'm going to say, I think the IE100 are a brilliant option, they're incredibly well priced for what you're getting, and they're a great option for someone looking for something that's relatively neutral with a slight tilt towards treble and detail emphasis. They're a great choice if you want to dabble with them for mixing, mastering and editing, and also if you want the versatility of both a wired and a wireless source. So if you're in the market for these, I can highly recommend them. I think they're a really great choice. And as always, I'll put some links down below in the description where you can pick up a pair of these for yourself. For now though, I hope you found this review useful. If you have, I'd love it if you'd hit subscribe and like. It really helps the channel out. Also, have a think about joining us on Patreon if you're interested in learning more about audio, having a chance to ask me questions directly, or just generally if you're interested in joining a wonderful community of like-minded people who enjoy talking about different audio topics. Beyond that though, I'll leave it to the music, so happy listening and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.